My name is Diana Carter, and 3 years ago my sister looked me in the eyes and told me I no longer existed to her. At first I thought she was speaking out of anger. Families fight. People say terrible things they don't mean. I figured we'd cool off, apologize, and eventually laugh about it over Thanksgiving dinner. I couldn't have been more wrong. Instead, she made it her mission to erase me from her life completely. She blocked my number, deleted every photo we had together, and told relatives that she didn't have a sister anymore. If anyone mentioned my name, she'd either leave the room or pretend she had no idea who they were talking about. Then things got even worse. I started hearing stories from cousins and family friends that she'd been telling people I was basically dead. At first it was just a figure of speech. Then the rumors became literal. She told distant relatives I had died after moving away. She accepted sympathy. She let people cry over someone who was very much alive. The most painful part wasn't the lie. It was discovering how many people believed her without ever calling me. I stopped attending family gatherings because I was tired of being treated like a ghost who had somehow wandered back into the room. I built a new life instead. A better one. I focused on my career, surrounded myself with people who actually cared about me, and slowly accepted that sometimes the people you're born with aren't the people who deserve a place in your future. I hadn't spoken to my sister in over 3 years. Not a text. Not a birthday card. Not even a Merry Christmas. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, there was a knock on my front door. When I opened it, she was standing there. She looked exhausted. Her expensive clothes were gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded sweatshirt. Her eyes were red from crying, and she held an envelope so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Before I could say a single word, she whispered the last sentence I ever expected to hear. "Diana. I need $20,000. I stared at the woman who had spent years convincing the world I was dead. And what she said next made me realize this visit had never been about making peace. It was about a secret so devastating that someone else's entire future depended on whether I opened that envelope. When I was growing up, everyone said my older sister, Melissa, and I were inseparable. She was 3 years older than me, louder than me, and had a way of making every room revolve around her. I was the quiet one. I loved books, spent weekends helping my dad fix things around the house, and tried to avoid drama whenever I could. "You're too soft, Diana," Melissa used to tease with a grin. "One day people are going to walk all over you." Maybe she was right. Or maybe I just believed that family was supposed to stick together no matter what. Our parents tried their best to treat us equally. Dad worked as an electrician while Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We weren't rich, but our home was full of laughter, movie nights, backyard barbecues, and traditions that made us feel close. At least that's how I remember it. Looking back now, I can see little cracks that everyone ignored. Melissa hated sharing attention. If I earned an award at school, she'd remind everyone that she'd won 2 awards when she was my age. If Dad complimented something I built in the garage, she'd suddenly have a problem that needed all his attention. At first, I thought it was normal sibling rivalry. I had no idea those little moments would eventually grow into something that would destroy our relationship. Everything started changing after college. Melissa landed a marketing job almost immediately. She loved expensive restaurants, designer handbags, and posting perfect pictures online. Her social media made her life look flawless. I took a different path. I became an accountant for a small construction company. The pay wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I rented a modest apartment, drove an old sedan that rattled every time I started it, and quietly saved as much money as I could. Mom often smiled whenever she visited. "I know it doesn't look exciting," she said one afternoon while helping me unpack groceries, "but you're building something real." Those words stayed with me. While everyone admired Melissa's lifestyle, I focused on stability. Over the next 7 years, I earned promotions, invested carefully, and eventually opened my own financial consulting firm with a former coworker named Karen. Karen wasn't just a business partner. He became one of my closest friends. "If we keep working like this," she told me during our first year, "we'll have something nobody can take away from us." I believed her. Business wasn't easy in the beginning. There were months when I wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake. Then things slowly changed. Clients started recommending us. Local businesses trusted us. Within 4 years, we had a growing team, a comfortable office, and enough success that I finally bought my first house. Nothing enormous. Just a cozy 2-story home with a small porch, a vegetable garden, and enough room that I finally felt like all those years of sacrifice had meant something. I didn't post about it online. I didn't throw a party. I simply moved in and kept living my life. Melissa, however, somehow found out. Oh, she said during one of the rare family dinners we both attended. So now you're rich? I laughed awkwardly. I'm comfortable. That's all. She smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind that disappears the moment everyone else looks away. From then on, every conversation became a competition. If Diana can afford a house, I guess business must be easier than having a real job. If Diana has that much money, maybe she should pay for Mom's birthday dinner. If Diana's doing so well, why is she still driving that old car? The comments sounded like jokes. Everyone laughed. Even I forced myself to smile. But Karen noticed. Your sister isn't teasing you, she said after meeting Melissa at a family barbecue. She's testing how much she can get away with. I brushed it off. That's just how she's always been. Karen looked at me for a long moment. No, she replied quietly. That's how you've learned to excuse her. I didn't know it then, but Karen was seeing something I refused to admit. Around the same time, our parents announced they were celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary with a large family gathering. Relatives from several states planned to attend. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. Mom was thrilled. This is going to be the first time everyone's together in almost a decade. I was genuinely excited. I spent weeks helping organize decorations, arranging catering, and even paying for a professional photographer because I wanted our parents to have memories they could treasure forever. Melissa volunteered too. She insisted on coordinating speeches and handling invitations. Leave it to me, she said confidently. I'll make sure everything's perfect. For once, it felt like we were working together again. Maybe adulthood had finally brought us back to the sisters we used to be. Maybe all those years of awkwardness were finally behind us. I couldn't have been more mistaken. Because less than 24 hours before our parents' anniversary celebration, I received a phone call from one of my cousins. His voice sounded confused. Diana. I'm sorry if this is a strange question. What is it? He hesitated. Melissa just called everyone about tomorrow. Okay. She told us, you won't be coming. I frowned. Why wouldn't I? There was another long silence. Then he asked the question that made my stomach drop. Are you sure you're okay? She sounded pretty convincing. Before I could ask what he meant, he quietly said something that made every hair on the back of my neck stand up. I think your sister just told the entire family that something terrible happened to you. And in that moment, I realized the anniversary party wasn't going to reunite our family. It was going to tear it apart. I sat frozen on my couch long after my cousin hung up. His words kept echoing in my head. I think your sister just told the entire family that something terrible happened to you. I immediately grabbed my phone and called Melissa. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Walked. I tried texting her. The message never delivered. A knot formed in my stomach as I started dialing other relatives. My aunt answered first. Diana, she gasped. I thought. You thought what? She hesitated before speaking. Melissa called this morning. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said there had been an accident and that you were gone. She told us your parents were too devastated to talk. For a moment I couldn't even breathe. I am talking to you right now, I finally whispered. I know, my aunt replied shakily. I don't understand what's happening. Within the next hour my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Cousins, uncles, family friends. Everyone was asking the same question. Weren't you? It was surreal. People who had spent years watching me grow up genuinely believed I had died because my own sister had told them so. The strangest part? Most of them apologized to me for believing her. I didn't even think to call, one cousin admitted. She sounded so convincing. Another relative confessed, she was crying so much that nobody questioned it. The more calls I received, the more confused I became. Why would Melissa do something like this? It wasn't a prank. It wasn't funny. It was cruel. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to my parents' house. When I pulled into the driveway, I found my dad dragging folding tables into the backyard while Mom arranged flowers on the patio. They looked perfectly normal. No tears. No emergency. No tragedy. Dad smiled when he saw me. You're early. I stared at him. Dad, have you talked to Melissa today? His smile faded. Not since yesterday. I explained everything as calmly as I could. The color drained from both of my parents' faces. Mom nearly dropped the vase she was holding. She told people you were dead, she whispered. Apparently. Dad immediately called Melissa. She answered him on the first ring. He put the phone on speaker. Melissa, he said firmly, what is going on? There was a brief pause. Then she laughed. Oh, come on. Everyone's overreacting. Dad's expression hardened. Did you tell the family Diana died? It wasn't exactly like that. Then explain. She sighed dramatically. I said she was dead to me. People misunderstood. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You told dozens of people I was dead. I shouted. No, she snapped. They assumed that because they interrupted me. Mom stepped closer to the phone. Melissa, several people said you were crying. I was emotional. Why? Because I'm tired of pretending Diana is a good person. The backyard fell silent. I stared at the phone, trying to understand how the conversation had gone so wrong. Melissa continued before anyone could respond. She's been acting like she's better than everyone ever since her business started making money. Dad frowned. That's not true. Really? Melissa shot back. She buys a house, acts humble, and suddenly everyone worships her. I've never asked anyone to do that, I said. No, she replied coldly. You don't have to. They do it anyway. For the first time I realized this wasn't about one phone call. This resentment had been building for years. Dad finally lost his patience. You owe your sister and this family an apology. Melissa laughed again. I'm not apologizing. You lied. I told my truth. Then she added something that stunned every one of us. And if she keeps pretending she's perfect, maybe everyone deserves to know what she's really like. The line went dead. Mom sat down in the nearest chair, covering her face. What is happening to her? She whispered. None of us had an answer. The anniversary celebration went ahead the next day, but it felt different. Every conversation stopped when Melissa and I entered the same room. Relatives kept pulling me aside. We're so sorry. I can't believe she did that. We thought we'd lost you. Melissa acted as though nothing had happened. She smiled for photographs. She laughed with cousins. She even hugged people she'd terrified the day before. Whenever our eyes met, she looked completely unfazed. Almost satisfied. Karen attended the party as my guest. She watched Melissa carefully throughout the evening. On the drive home, she broke the silence. She's not finished. What do you mean? Karen looked out the window before answering. People like your sister don't create chaos unless they're working toward something. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. You think she has a plan? I don't think. Karen turned toward me with a serious expression. I know. 2 days later, I arrived at my office expecting a normal workday. Instead, my receptionist met me at the door looking terrified. Diana. What happened? She swallowed hard. A woman came in this morning. Who? She handed me a business card with shaking hands. Written across the back in Melissa's unmistakable handwriting were 6 chilling words. Now they'll finally know the truth. At that moment, I realized she hadn't just attacked my reputation with our family. She had just taken her first step toward destroying everything I had spent years building. I stared at the business card for several seconds before I could even speak. What exactly happened? I asked my receptionist. Emily looked like she was trying to remember every detail. She came in around 9 this morning. She said she was your sister and wanted to surprise you. Did she ask for me? Emily nodded. When I told her you hadn't arrived yet, she smiled and said she'd wait. How long was she here? Maybe 20 minutes. I looked around the office. Everything seemed normal. No broken furniture. No missing files. No obvious damage. So why are you so upset? Emily hesitated. Because she started talking to everyone. My stomach tightened. What did she say? Emily lowered her voice. She told the staff you've been stealing money from clients. The room suddenly felt smaller. What? She said the authorities were investigating you and that we should all prepare to lose our jobs. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did anyone actually believe her? Before Emily could answer, Karen walked out of her office. You'd be surprised. She closed the door behind her. 3 employees came to me asking if they should start looking for new jobs. I rubbed my forehead. This is insane. Karen crossed her arms. It is. But rumors spread faster than facts. I gathered everyone in the conference room. There were only 14 employees, but every single one looked nervous. I took a deep breath. I want to clear something up. The room became completely silent. My sister came here this morning and made several false accusations. People exchanged uneasy glances. There is no investigation. We have never stolen from a client. Our business is financially healthy. If any of you have concerns, ask me directly instead of believing rumors. For a moment no one spoke. Then one employee raised his hand. If that's true, why would your own sister lie? It was an honest question. One I couldn't answer. I wish I knew. The meeting ended, but the damage had already been done. Trust had been shaken. Not because I'd done anything wrong. Because someone close enough to know me had chosen to weaponize our relationship. Over the next week things only got worse. A long-time client canceled a meeting without explanation. Another requested copies of every financial report we'd ever prepared. One business owner politely admitted he'd heard concerning family issues and wanted to wait before renewing his contract. Karen spent hours reassuring clients that everything was fine. Even so, I could see the stress wearing on her. This isn't sustainable, she admitted one evening. I know. You have to stop her. I don't know how. Karen looked at me carefully. Have you ever asked yourself why she's doing this now? I've asked myself that every day. No. She shook her head. I mean, why now? That question stayed with me. A few days later I got my answer. Mom called. Diana, can you come over tonight? Is everything okay? I'd rather tell you in person. When I arrived, Dad looked exhausted. Melissa was already there. She sat comfortably in the living room like nothing had happened. The moment she saw me, she smiled. Nice of you to finally show up. I ignored the comment. Dad cleared his throat. Melissa says she wants to explain. I folded my arms. I'm listening. She leaned back confidently. I've been having some financial difficulties. I almost laughed. So that's what all this is about. You don't understand. Then explain. She sighed dramatically. My husband invested in a business that failed. How much? She looked away. Almost everything. Dad's eyes widened. You never told us. I was embarrassed. Mom quietly asked, how bad is it? Melissa took a deep breath. We're about to lose the house. Silence filled the room. For a second I actually felt sorry for her. Then she looked directly at me. But that's where you come in. I frowned. What does that mean? You have money. I worked for it. I know. She smiled again. So you'll help. The entitlement in her voice caught me completely off guard. You've spent weeks trying to ruin my life. I was emotional. You told people I died. That was a misunderstanding. You walked into my office and accused me of crimes. You'll recover. I stared at her in disbelief. And after all that, you think I'm just going to write you a check? Her smile disappeared. I think family helps family. I couldn't hold back anymore. Family also tells the truth. She stood up so quickly that her chair scraped across the floor. Oh, so now you're going to lecture me? No. I met her eyes. I'm going to say no. The room fell silent. Melissa's expression changed instantly. The sadness vanished. The tears disappeared. In their place was pure anger. You'll regret that. I shook my head. No. I won't. She pointed a finger directly at me. If you won't help me willingly. She paused just long enough to make every word feel deliberate. I'll make sure nobody ever trusts you again. She stormed out, slamming the front door so hard that the family photos rattled on the walls. Mom burst into tears. Dad sat motionless. I thought I'd just survived the worst conversation of my life. I was wrong. Because less than an hour after I got home, my phone buzzed with hundreds of notifications. Someone had posted a long, emotional story online accusing me of abandoning my own sister when she was fighting for her family's survival. The post included childhood photos, family pictures, private details that only Melissa could have shared. And before midnight, it had already been shared thousands of times. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my phone buzzed again. By sunrise, the post had spread far beyond our family. People I had never met were calling me selfish, greedy, and heartless. Money changed her. Imagine refusing to save your own sister. She deserves to lose everything. Most of them had no idea who I was. They only knew the version of me Melissa had created. I walked into the office exhausted, hoping work would distract me. Instead, Karen was already waiting outside my office. "You need to see this." She handed me a tablet. The original post wasn't the worst part anymore. Melissa had uploaded a video. She sat in her living room, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to do this publicly," she said into the camera. "But my sister left me with no choice. She claimed I had become obsessed with money. She said I ignored our parents. She insisted I cared more about my business than my own family." The comments were brutal. Thousands of strangers believed every word. Karen looked at me. "She's turning public opinion into a weapon." I nodded slowly. "But why?" Karen hesitated. "I hired someone yesterday." I looked up. "Hired who?" "A private investigator." I blinked. "You did what?" "I know it sounds extreme." "It is." "So is everything your sister has done." She leaned forward. "Diana, people don't destroy relationships like this unless they're hiding something bigger." For the first time I couldn't argue. 3 days later, Karen walked into my office carrying a thick manila folder. "I think we found it." She closed the door. Inside the folder were property records, court filings, and financial documents. At first, none of it made sense. Then Karen pointed to one page. "Look at the dates." Melissa hadn't started having financial problems recently. She'd been drowning in debt for nearly 5 years. Credit cards, personal loans, private lenders, missed mortgage payments. The numbers kept getting worse. "She lied," I whispered. Karen nodded. "Not only that." She handed me another document. It showed that Melissa's husband hadn't lost money in a failed investment. He had withdrawn nearly $200,000 from their savings account over several months. Where did it go? Karen slid over another sheet. Luxury vacations, designer stores, high-end jewelry, a luxury SUV, expensive furniture. The so-called financial emergency wasn't caused by bad luck. It had been caused by years of reckless spending. I leaned back in my chair. "So why ask me now?" Karen smiled sadly. "Keep reading." Near the bottom of the file was a letter from the bank. Unless they paid a large overdue balance within 30 days, their home would be foreclosed. Exactly 30 days. Then something else caught my eye. There was a handwritten note attached to one of the documents. "Potential inheritance." What does that mean? Karen took a deep breath. "I spoke to someone at the courthouse." She lowered her voice. "Your parents recently updated their wills." I frowned. "They never mentioned that." "They didn't have to." My heart started racing. What changed? Karen looked me directly in the eyes. "According to the attorney's assistant." She paused. "Your parents planned to divide everything equally." "Okay. But Melissa somehow became convinced they were changing the will in your favor because your business was more successful." I stared at her. "So she thought that if she destroyed your relationship with the family first, she'd have a better chance of getting everything." The room fell silent. Suddenly every strange moment from the last few years made sense. The jealousy, the rumors, the fake grief, the lies. None of it had been random. It had been calculated. She wanted everyone to believe I was selfish before any inheritance was ever discussed. My phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice was shaking. "Diana. What's wrong?" "Your father collapsed." I was already grabbing my keys. "Is he okay?" "They're taking him to the hospital." I raced there as fast as I could. When I arrived, Mom was sitting in the waiting room crying. Dad was stable, but the doctors wanted to keep him overnight because his blood pressure had skyrocketed. The stress had finally caught up with him. As I hugged Mom, I heard familiar footsteps behind me. Melissa had arrived. She wasn't crying. She wasn't worried. Instead, she walked straight toward me with an expression I'd never seen before. Confident. Almost victorious. She leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "This is your fault." I looked at her in disbelief. "My fault?" If you had just given me the money. She smiled faintly. Dad wouldn't be lying in that hospital bed. Before I could respond, Dad's attorney walked into the waiting room carrying a sealed envelope. He looked around until his eyes landed on both of us. I was asked to deliver this only if something happened to Mr. Carter. Melissa's eyes lit up immediately. She took one eager step forward. The attorney held up a hand. No. Then he looked directly at me. This letter is addressed specifically to Diana. Melissa's face lost all its color. And in that moment, I realized Dad had been preparing for something long before any of us knew the truth. My hands trembled as I accepted the sealed envelope from Dad's attorney. Melissa stared at it as though it already belonged to her. What is that? She demanded. The attorney remained calm. As I said, this is addressed to Diana. You can give it to me, Melissa insisted. We're family. No. His answer was immediate. Your father left very clear instructions. The waiting room fell silent. Mom looked just as confused as I was. I didn't even know he wrote a letter, she whispered. Neither did I. The attorney nodded toward me. You should read it somewhere private. I walked into the quiet hospital garden behind the building. Karen had arrived after hearing about Dad and joined me without saying a word. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first sentence made my chest tighten. If you're reading this, it means the family has reached the point I feared it would. I swallowed hard and continued. Dad explained that he had noticed Melissa becoming increasingly jealous over the years. At first he believed it was temporary. But eventually he began documenting strange incidents because he worried she might one day try to manipulate the family against me. He listed examples I had completely forgotten. The time Melissa secretly canceled my birthday dinner, then told everyone I never wanted to celebrate. The Christmas when expensive gifts disappeared before anyone opened presents, only to be found weeks later hidden in Melissa's garage. The false story she spread years ago claiming I refused to lend money to our cousin, even though I had quietly paid his medical bills. Dad ended the letter with one heartbreaking sentence. I kept hoping she would choose honesty before greed. There was another document beneath the letter. A flash drive. Attached to it was a sticky note. If necessary, this explains everything. Karen looked at me. I think your father knew exactly what he was doing. Before we could examine it, my phone rang. It was Emily from the office. Diana, you need to come here. What happened now? There are reporters outside. I froze. Reporters. They're asking employees whether you abandoned your sister. I closed my eyes. Melissa's online story had escaped social media. Local news websites had picked it up. By the time Karen and I reached the office, 2 news vans were parked outside. Cameras turned toward us the moment I stepped out of my car. Diana, is it true you refused to help your struggling sister? Do you regret your decision? Would you like to respond to the allegations? Karen quickly guided me through the side entrance. Inside, employees looked frightened. One of our largest clients had postponed a contract worth nearly $500,000. Another had requested an emergency audit before continuing business. My reputation wasn't just under attack anymore. My company was paying the price. Karen placed the flash drive on my desk. I think it's time. I inserted it into my computer. Several folders appeared. Security footage. Audio recordings. Scanned documents. I looked at Karen in confusion. What is all this? She clicked on the first video. It showed my parents' living room from almost 2 years earlier. Dad had quietly installed security cameras after several valuable items disappeared from the house. The footage showed Melissa entering Dad's office while everyone else was outside. She opened a locked filing cabinet using a spare key. Then she photographed stacks of legal papers. Another video showed her searching through financial documents while talking on the phone. I need to know how much they're worth, she whispered. A third recording was even worse. Melissa didn't know Dad had left a voice recorder running in his study. Her voice came through clearly. If Diana stays everyone's favorite, I'll end up with nothing. Someone on the other end of the call laughed. So what are you going to do? Melissa answered without hesitation. I'll make sure they stop trusting her. Karen slowly paused the recording. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Every lie. Every rumor. Every attack. She had admitted it herself. I felt sick. Not because I had finally uncovered the truth. Because my own father had spent years secretly collecting evidence against his own daughter. He must have hoped he'd never need it. Karen finally broke the silence. This clears your name. I nodded. But it destroys hers. Before I could process everything, my phone rang again. It was Mom. Diana. Her voice sounded different. Plumber. Resolved. I just found something. What is it? I was cleaning your father's desk while he rested. She took a shaky breath. I found a folder addressed to me. What was inside? There are bank statements. So, they prove someone has been taking money from your father's retirement account for almost 3 years. My heart skipped. Who? Mom's answer came in a whisper. The withdrawals were transferred into an account owned by Melissa. Before I could even respond, another call came through from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello. The voice on the other end was low and serious. Miss Carter. Yes. My name is Detective Lawson. My grip tightened around the phone. We need to speak with you immediately. About what? There was a brief pause before he answered. We've just received evidence suggesting your sister's actions may involve more than family disputes. I frowned. What do you mean? His next sentence changed everything. We believe financial fraud may have been committed. And your name appears to have been used without your knowledge. At that moment, I realized Melissa hadn't just been trying to destroy my reputation. Someone had been using my identity. And I was about to discover that the $20,000 she wanted was only a tiny piece of a much bigger crime. I spent the next 2 hours sitting in a small interview room at the police station with Karen beside me. Detective Lawson placed a thick file on the table. I want to be clear, he began. Right now you're not under investigation. Then why am I here? I asked. Because someone appears to have used your name in several financial transactions. He opened the file and slid a stack of documents toward me. The signature looked almost identical to mine. The address listed was one I'd lived at years ago. But I had never signed any of those papers. I've never seen these before, I said. We believe you, Detective Lawson replied. That's why we contacted you instead of treating you as a suspect. He pointed to another page. The bank contacted us after noticing irregular transfers between several accounts. Whose accounts? He looked directly at me. Your parents. A cold feeling spread through my chest. The money was moved through accounts connected to your sister and then routed using paperwork that falsely identified you as the authorized party. I couldn't speak. Karen broke the silence. So Diana was supposed to take the blame? That's one possibility. The detective nodded. We're still gathering evidence. By the time we left the station, I felt emotionally drained. Everything Melissa had done suddenly made sense. If the fraud had been discovered before the truth came out, everyone would have believed I was responsible. The rumors. The fake stories. The attacks on my reputation. She had been building the perfect cover. The next morning Mom called. Dad wants everyone at the house. Everyone. Yes. Even Melissa. When Karen and I arrived, several people were already there. Dad, who looked tired but determined after returning home from the hospital. Dad's attorney. Detective Lawson. 2 uniformed officers. And finally, Melissa. She walked in wearing expensive sunglasses and carrying herself with the same confidence she'd shown for weeks. The moment she noticed the police officers, her smile faded. Dad slowly stood up. I asked everyone here because I'm done watching this family destroy itself. Melissa crossed her arms. So this is an intervention now? No. Dad's voice remained calm. It's the truth. The attorney connected a laptop to the television in the living room. Melissa frowned. What's that? Evidence. The first video began playing. It showed Melissa searching through Dad's office. Her face turned pale. That camera wasn't supposed to be there, she blurted out. The room went silent. She had accidentally admitted she knew exactly what she had done. The attorney played the audio recording next. If Diana stays everyone's favorite, I'll end up with nothing. Melissa immediately shook her head. That recording is edited. Detective Lawson spoke for the first time. It has already been authenticated. Her confidence began slipping away. Dad looked at her with tears in his eyes. Melissa. She refused to meet his gaze. I gave you every chance to tell the truth. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom placed the bank statements on the coffee table. Then explained these. Melissa glanced at them. I borrowed the money. You forged my signature, Dad replied quietly. You never asked. She took a step backward. I was going to pay it back. When? No answer. The detective opened another folder. We also recovered electronic records linking the forged financial documents to a laptop registered in your home. Melissa looked around the room desperately. This is all because of Diana. No, I finally said. It's because of your choices. He pointed at me. You think you're so perfect. I never said I was. You've always been Mom and Dad's favorite. Dad interrupted. That's not true. Yes, it is. Melissa shouted. You always praised her. Dad slowly shook his head. We praised hard work. Those 5 words seemed to hit her harder than any accusation. For the first time I saw genuine emotion on her face. Not anger. Not manipulation. Just years of bitterness finally breaking apart. She began crying. I just wanted someone to notice me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We did notice you. No. Melissa wiped her face. You noticed her because she never failed. I quietly stepped forward. You have no idea how many times I wished you'd simply be happy for me. She looked at me in silence. I didn't want to compete with you. I wanted my sister. The room became painfully quiet. Melissa slowly lowered her head. I'm sorry. Those words would have meant everything. Months earlier. Years earlier. But after everything she'd done. They couldn't erase the damage. Detective Lawson finally stepped forward. Melissa Carter. He calmly explained her rights before placing her under arrest for multiple financial offenses, including forgery, fraud, and identity-related crimes pending the outcome of the investigation. She didn't resist. As the officers escorted her toward the front door, she stopped beside me. Without looking up, she whispered, I really did convince myself this was your fault. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Oh. You convinced yourself because it was easier than admitting the truth. She nodded once. Then she walked out the front door. The house felt strangely quiet after the police cars disappeared. I thought the nightmare was finally over. Then Dad's attorney cleared his throat. There is still one matter we need to discuss. He placed another sealed envelope on the table. This concerns your father's final decision regarding the family's estate. Every eye in the room turned toward that envelope. And none of us knew what was waiting inside. No one reached for the envelope. For a long moment, the only sound in the living room was the ticking of the old clock that had hung above our fireplace since I was a child. Dad looked older than I had ever seen him. The last few weeks had taken something out of him. He glanced at the attorney and nodded. You can read it. The attorney carefully opened the envelope and unfolded several pages. This document replaces Mr. Carter's previous estate plan. I immediately raised a hand. Dad, you don't have to do this today. He gave me a tired smile. I do. His voice was quiet but steady. I've spent too many years hoping problems would fix themselves. They don't. The attorney continued reading. The estate would still be divided fairly, but with one major change. Melissa's share would no longer be given directly to her. Instead, it would be placed into a protected trust. If she was convicted of financial crimes, declared bankruptcy, or attempted to manipulate family assets again, the trustee would control the funds until strict legal conditions were met. Dad wasn't trying to punish her. He was trying to make sure she could never destroy herself, or anyone else, with money again. Mom quietly wiped away tears. He wrote this months ago. Dad nodded. I prayed I'd never need it. I looked at him. You knew things were this bad? I knew something was wrong. He sighed deeply. I just didn't realize how far she was willing to go. The attorney handed me another sheet. It wasn't about money. It was Dad's personal letter to both of us. He asked me to read it aloud. My hands shook as I began. To my daughters. If you're hearing these words together, then my greatest fear has already happened. Families survive arguments. They survive disagreements. What they cannot survive is pride that refuses to admit the truth. I paused, trying to keep my voice steady. Melissa, I have loved you every day of your life. Nothing you have done changes that. But love is not permission to lie, steal, or hurt the people who care about you. Mom quietly cried beside Dad. I continued. Diana, I know you've spent years trying to keep peace by staying silent. Sometimes silence is kindness. Other times it allows harm to continue. Never confuse forgiveness with accepting abuse. Those words hit me harder than anything else. For years I had convinced myself that avoiding conflict made me the bigger person. In reality, it had allowed Melissa to keep crossing every boundary. Dad reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. I looked at him in surprise. For what? For asking you to keep the peace so many times. Tears filled my eyes. You were trying to hold the family together. And I should have held everyone accountable instead. For the first time in years, neither of us felt the need to pretend everything was okay. Over the following months, life slowly began to settle. The investigation confirmed everything Detective Lawson had suspected. Melissa eventually accepted a plea agreement after overwhelming evidence showed she had forged documents, transferred money from Dad's retirement account, and used my identity in several financial transactions. The court ordered restitution, probation, and strict financial monitoring. She also lost nearly everything she had been trying so desperately to protect. It wasn't the dramatic ending people online expected. There were no celebrations, no victory speeches, just consequences. Once the truth became public, the same people who had criticized me began sending messages of apology. Some admitted they should never have believed a one-sided story. Others simply disappeared, embarrassed by how quickly they had judged someone they didn't know. I didn't answer most of those messages. Not because I was angry. Because I had finally learned that I didn't need strangers' approval to know who I was. Back at the office, clients slowly returned. The company recovered. Some even told us they trusted us more after seeing how honestly we handled such a difficult situation. Karen laughed one afternoon as we signed a contract with the client we'd almost lost. I told you the truth lasts longer than gossip. He was right. About 6 months later, I received a letter from Melissa. It wasn't a request for money. It wasn't an excuse. It was only 3 handwritten pages. She admitted that her jealousy had started years before either of us realized it. Every achievement of mine had felt like proof that she was failing, and instead of improving her own life, she had tried to tear mine apart. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She wrote that she understood if I never did. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Maybe one day we'd have a conversation. Maybe we wouldn't. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you owe someone because they share your last name. It's something that can only exist when trust is rebuilt, and trust takes far longer to repair than it does to break. These days my life is quieter. Dad recovered well and spends more time in his workshop than worrying about family drama. Mom finally smiles without forcing it. Karen is still my closest friend and business partner. And as for me, I still live in the same little house with the vegetable garden I planted years ago. Only now I lock the gate, protect my peace, and no longer apologize for setting boundaries. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't getting revenge. It's refusing to let someone else's bitterness define the rest of your life. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments.